We're going to look at rearranging formulae, which is also known as changing the subject. Very quickly, I'm going to recap how to solve, or a principle behind solving equations, and if you can remember that, this is very, very easy. If you can't remember that, you need to practice this first. So, we're solving an equation, which means you've got to find out what x is algebraically or symbolically on the page. That means get x all by itself. So you have to see what's being done to x and remove and unpeel the things around it that are happening. Keeping track of bid mass, you should be able to see that dividing by 3 is the last thing that happened to it, so that's the first thing we can peel off. So we're going to add 3 to both sides. We're going to times both sides by 3, as that's the inverse of dividing by 3. And that gets us 4x take 7 is 15. We're going to add 7 to both sides to get rid of this take 7, so 4x is 22. I'm going to divide by 4 on both sides, so x is 22 quarters, which simplifies down to 11 halves, and if you happen to like mixed numbers, it's 5 and a half. Okay, that should be straightforward. If that's not straightforward, you're not ready to do the rearranging stuff, so go back and do that again if you are, if you found that tricky, but that's a refresher. These choices here, why we did these 3 things, is the main thing to get from this. So here's a formula. We want to make x the subject. That is literally the phrasing that means get x by itself. It's the same thought that happened here. We want to get x all by itself, and you'll notice I've picked the same algebra. So that should mean and clear to you that the same 3 steps are going to apply in the same order. So we're going to multiply by 3. The difference here is that this left-hand side is not a number, whereas here the right-hand side was a number. So when we times by 3, we get something a little bit different. Y times 3, you should know, is 3y. So 3y is 4x take 7. Get rid of this take 7 by adding 7. That'll cancel it out nicely. Now we're not adding 7y, we're just adding 7. So remember your basic algebra, your collecting terms. Adding 7 is different from adding 7y. And finally dividing by 4, which in algebra is really easy. You just write divide 4. So that now has an equation where x is the subject. Technically it's not the subject because it's left to right. So it should be x equals 3y plus 7 over 4. But that last step is just writing it in the right order. So if you can solve equations, this type is very, very easy. The harder work you've got later in the week has a slightly different type in, but it's the same principle. We want to get some letter by itself. Here it's t we want to get by itself. You'll notice here that t appears twice in the same fraction, which is a bit of a fiddle. As we saw with quadratic stuff, clearing the fraction is actually quite helpful. So we're dividing by this whole thing. So let's multiply that whole thing to make not a fraction anymore. We get p lots of 2t take 3 equals 5t plus 4. And that came from multiplying by 2t take 3. Just this whole thing here multiplied up. Expand the bracket, so we get 2pt take 3 is 5t plus 4. Now at this point, there's a general principle which isn't strictly always true, but it's usually a good way to go. If you gather and collect all the letters you care about, in this case it's t, on one side of the equation, and put everything else on the other side, almost always something simple pops out at the end, or at least something simple enough to complete. So that's a useful heuristic if you've got a problem that you don't know what to do with yet. Maybe bring the things you care about to one side. Here it's the t's. So we're going to take 5t from both sides. So we get 2pt take 5t take 3 is 4. And we're going to leave these t's alone, so we're going to add 3 to both sides to move it over there. So now we've got all the t's on the same side of the equation at least, all in the same height, as it were, not part of fraction. And because t is what we care about, and it's in every term, we should factorise that out. So that means that we get t lots of 2p take 5. That equals 7. So now we've got t as a single thing, all by itself, a single letter, which we can turn into a single term by dividing by all of this stuff. So we're going to divide by 2p take 5. And that gets us t is 7 over 2p take 5. And now we've got t by itself, all with the help of this factorising step in the middle. Okay, and that should cover most of the work you've got for the next couple of days. Enjoy!